It's been quite a season here in the orchard. I guess I'll start with the successes. Unfortunately, well, I wouldn't say there aren't a lot, but not as many as I hoped for. So a few of the persimmon trees that have been bearing for a couple years or a few years hung on to all their fruits and did really well. So there are a lot of fruit, and that means we'll have plenty of seed for growing new plants and be able to take some fruit to farmers markets. So as they drop, someone, probably an opossum or raccoon, came in and cleared up all the drops last night. But generally the way I harvest is I just do a little shake, and whichever ones fall off, I eat. They have to be really, really nice and soft, like a overripe tomato, to be enjoyable. Before that, they're full of tannins and really will make your mouth very dry. So, in addition to getting pretty decent fruit off of a few trees, the other big success was the grafts that my daughter and I did. And what I found is the larger diameter the graft, the scion, the better they work. And I was able to speak with a few other people. Oh, look at this little guy. What are you doing? I was able to speak with a few other people who all found the same thing. So, oh, look at that. See these broken branches there? That means the probably possum, or again, could be raccoon, has already found them and is harvesting. So most of the grafts worked out really well, and this one actually didn't even put on the most growth. A few of them put on, that one's Proc. This one is Rosayanka, which I'm really excited about. These grafts put on a lot of growth. So this is just bark grafting. I've got a video about that. Super simple technique. We did the whole orchard here in, I don't know, 2 hours or something like that, whichever trees we wanted to do. Grafting over the males and the female trees that don't have such good tasting fruit. So a lot of the trees are still coming into bearing. Persimmons take a long time to come into bearing, which means they can start out with a fruit set. This one's got a few fruit. This one probably will be nice and soft. Yeah. They need to be this soft, and the inside will look like that when they're ripe. Really gushy. So some of the trees did really well. I find usually when a very happy female tree is maybe 4 or 5, they'll flower, they'll put on some fruit, and then they'll drop those fruit. You won't get any fruit that year. The next year they'll put on a much larger fruit set and drop a good chunk of that, but you'll get a few. And then the year after that, you might be getting like a full fruit set that it bears all the way to maturity. Here's another one of those Proc grafts. Good amount of growth on that. So next year, we'll cut that branch off and this branch off, leave some of these lower branches, and then the year after that, we'll clear out the lower branches, and then this will be all the varieties that we want. And of course, I could have just planted varieties to begin with, but these were all seedlings that I started with, and some of them I'm keeping because they're awesome. So the seedling gene pool is really wonderful, but you don't need half males to get good pollination. I'm gonna leave a few males for sure, but so this tree, for example, started off with a full fruit set, and now there's just a few here and there, and they don't even look good. And so this tree decided to pretty much abort that this year's crop, and that was, and you can see them on the ground here, all these little blue dead fruits. That was because of the drought. We got a huge drought that lasted for 2 months. We got basically no rain in 2 months and super hot, like just 90s after 90s after 90s. And they held on for most of that drought, and then just at the end, they couldn't hack it anymore, and they dropped most of their fruit. Only the best producers kept their fruit. And then we got 4 inches of rain, almost 4 inches of rain to end the drought in one night, and half of the fruit from the good trees, like this one, and this one, and the one in the front there, all fell off because they took up the water just like tomatoes and cracked and fell off and rotted. We ate what we could, but the seeds weren't even super ready yet. Here's another graft, came out well. So that was sort of a double whammy where I thought I was gonna get all this fruit, and then the drought took out 3/4 of it, and then the rain that ended the drought also took out a bunch of it. But this is actually one of the individuals that I think might end up being a new variety, because they don't look so big right now, but these fruits are as big as Proc. To be honest, the flavor isn't quite as amazing as Proc is, but they're pretty darn good. And sometimes I've learned to be really patient with persimmons, because the flavor in the first year or two of fruiting is not necessarily indicative of what the flavor of that variety will be. When they get, they're like, I mean, it's also something about just growing seedling trees in general. When they're seedlings, they have to, a graft, the actual piece of wood that you hold in your hands could be, for apples, could be 300 or 400 years old. That wood already has matured in a certain sense. For seedlings, they are literally a new individual, and they have to go from vegetative to fruiting. And that process takes years. It doesn't just, like the first time they flower, it doesn't mean they're mature. They're like, they go through stages of adolescence or something like that. And the fruits don't taste, in the first few years, they don't necessarily taste the way they will later on. So I'm not gonna just get rid of a tree just because its fruits don't taste good in the first year. So then the pawpaws too, we're starting to see some good fruit. I gotta come out with a bucket and harvest. They drop these right on the ground for you to pick up. It's as simple as that. I don't really like to pick them up off the tree. Wow, a couple of these are really going for it. I don't like to pick them up off the tree because it's hard to know exactly when they're ripe. But again, like this one has a really nice give to it, and the skin will just tear like that really easily, and you can see that sort of syrupy look to the flesh inside. That means it's perfectly ripe. And you wouldn't want it to be browning on the outside. That would mean that it's overripe and has some unsavory chemicals that we don't really want to eat a lot of. Pawpaws should be eaten in moderation, and they can have some toxicity effects if you eat a ton of them. It's not to be too alarming. It's sort of like apples. Like if you eat too many apple seeds, you can get sick. It's a different chemistry. It's not cyanide, but it does have neurotoxin effects if you eat a ton of the fruits, and especially that brown, overripe kind of fruit is not something to eat. There's a reason why all the animals will avoid that as well. So anyway, that's the update. The pawpaws, actually, I was surprised. Pawpaws are a floodplain tree, and I didn't think they would do well in a drought, but they lost no fruit. The same drought that took a lot of fruit off persimmons took nothing off these pawpaws. And there's enough here that I feel like it's fairly, a good sample size to actually say something about it. And then over here, I switched gears. We were gonna do an orchard over here, and then we've decided to do blueberries. So we just finished amending the soil. The pH was naturally low in this field to begin with, 5.5, so I acidified it just a little bit to bring it down to a target of 5. And I actually have trouble growing blueberry plants, so I ordered blueberry plants, and we're gonna plant these out next spring. I'm super excited. We're just gonna do 2 varieties in here, keep it really simple, because this is gonna be for like commercial blueberry production for our farmers market. This is, it's a half acre. It's not a huge plot, but it's significant, so we need it to be really efficient. We can bring wood chips in from the road right to the headland of the field and then bring them down the row so we can mulch every year. So I remember the last time I did a video of this field, I said this is the last time it was going to get plowed and it was going to be an orchard. And that just didn't happen because life is complicated. And now we've switched gears and we're doing blueberries. So very excited to do a couple videos probably probably next spring when we get into planting, because it's going to be a fairly involved process, because we're also going to try to put up some bird netting. So that's actually going to be the biggest expense, amazingly. Anyway, that's what's going on in the persimmon and pawpaw orchard.